Hey everyone, hi, welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about the New York Public Library's most checked out books for 2025. Dear gracious, that was a mouthful, but totally worth it. So, if you're new, my name is Shelly. I actually am a librarian, not in New York, in South Carolina, and I'm a children's librarian. Though, because of my profession and my lifelong love of books, I also love libraries, and I am infinitely curious as to what was most checked out this past year, what was popular among the people. So if you're new and enjoying the vibe, perhaps subscribe. But without any further rambling on, let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. I don't just want to talk through this list. I also want to wonder, why did this book make the most borrowed books? Why is it one of the 10 most borrowed books in one of the busiest and most populated cities in the United States? All right, so that is our goal. Coming in at number 10, because we're going to start at 10 and work our way up to number 1, is Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is exactly what Emily Henry is most known to have done, which is to write a romance. And that's what Funny Story is. Actually, that's what the majority of her most popular books are. What's interesting to me is that her most recent book was Great Big Beautiful Life. And in that book, from what I know, I've only read one Emily Henry, and it was Book Lovers. But from what I know of Great Big Beautiful Life is that she's doing something slightly different. So I'm wondering if the Emily Henry curious people out there know that that book is like a little bit different than what she normally serves in her contemporary romances. And if they're just going to the other most recent book, which would be Funny Story. So I thought it was interesting that Funny Story made it more than Great Big Beautiful Life. If you are an Emily Henry fan and have read all of her contemporary romances, maybe you can explain the difference to me of the difference between Great Big Beautiful Life and Funny Story. Number 9, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I really thought that the romantasy moment that we can attribute somewhat to Sarah J. Maas, I thought it was simmering down a little bit. But instead, I look at this list and I'm totally proven wrong. I think that people who are romantasy curious, and I know there are some of you out there, I am that person as well. The romantasy curious are going to go to like the root of the genre, the seed that started it all. And although I would argue that maybe Twilight by Stephanie Meyers is actually the origin, I would have to argue like the brand of romantasy that is so popular among readers today really starts with A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is why I think that's why it made it on the list. Number 8 is Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. This I was surprised by. Like in my initial reaction, I was like, oh wow, Covenant of Water. I have read this myself. It is a multi-generational family saga that has a lot of meandering storylines, and that I once very famously said I felt imprisoned by its pages. It was so long. When this book came out though, I remember reacting to it in like a new releases video. A bunch of people came out in the comments and they were like, hey, just so you know, like Verghese is a very well-loved author. And his first novel was just so well received. So people have been waiting for his second novel for years. So it makes me wonder if that initial debut is still affecting people, and they're still running out to get it. I feel like that's a weak connection though. Like, why would it be number 8 on the most borrowed books on this list for 2025? It's a little bit of an older release, but it still has its newness. It's still shiny. It's a penny that's a little bit shiny still. I think it was perhaps picked for a couple of book clubs. Fine. I wouldn't have picked it for my book club. Okay. And the other thing is that it is a big and very expensive book. It is a big book and it's an expensive book. And so I wonder if people are borrowing it to like try it out or to see if this is something they want to eventually purchase. That's what I wonder. I might be totally wrong, but I do wonder if that's why it makes this list. The expense. Also, I'll have to say that big books tend to make people very curious. Large, chunky novels, they have an allure to certain kinds of readers. I think to a lot of readers out there. There are readers out there, myself included, where a big book was so insanely satisfying. And it was satisfying in part because the story was it was so all consuming and it lasted for so long and it made such a deep impression. And so I think that once you have an experience like that as a reader, you're curious as to whether other big chunky books are going to do the same. And I really think that that's the big book effect. When you have a great experience with a really chunky book, you would love to replicate it. And so I think that there is something about a big chunky book like Covenant of Water that is alluring just because of its page count. I think I discount the popularity of this next author because I've not read her, and it's Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. She has just been one of those romance authors that have captured a certain audience and that has hardcore fans. And I just don't know, because I don't know her work, it's hard for me to assess like why people are going out and borrowing her books. So I think that that's a little bit of a gap for me. So maybe you all can tell me. But I do know that she has her fans. I think she has like hardcore fans. Maybe they're all in New York. The next book I actually started and I didn't finish because I wasn't really into it. And it's The Dream Hotel by Layla Lalami. Lalami, I believe, was honored by the Pulitzer. I think she was like shortlisted or was a Pulitzer Prize honoree. Her book did not win. And so I think that she's got some credibility there, but also she was honored by the Women's Prize. And for us Americans following the British Women's Prize, it's funny because some titles are just not available and we kind of have to take what we can get. And The Dream Hotel was like a book that was out here and available for us. And so I wonder if that has since like made like sort of like stirred up a storm around the Dream Hotel because it was one of the available books from the Women's Prize. It also was honored by Read with Jenna and it's been on lists. But I don't know, it wasn't my thing. So I think like I started it and I DNF'd it and then I promptly forgot about it. So then the first time I'm thinking about it again is with this list. And I'm like, well, I think that it really is that nexus of being a bit futuristic, talking about something that is rather poignant, which is about a woman who under suspicious circumstances, like the government is suspicious of her, whether they should be or not. And she's in prison. And now her life is like in this like holding system, weird prison type feeling. And, she's living a very different life than she was living just a few months ago. And so it's like following that experience. And I think it's just right at that nexus of like a little bit futuristic, a little bit literary, perhaps a little bit challenging. Maybe it talks about themes that are very prevalent right now, that are very applicable in this moment. And that's why it's being constantly borrowed. So I don't know. Anyways, but I'm like, this is guesswork for me. So next up is The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. The reason why I think that this book is on this list is because it got so much praise last year from every wrap-up list. It seemed like it was on like, it was just everywhere. So when you see the best 10 books of blah, 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 it was almost guaranteed that this book was going to be on it. Now, I haven't read it. I have a James McBride on my shelves, not this one, but a different one. So I don't know his writing. But I think that because it made such a splash on end of the year lists for last year, we see that its life is continuing to be played out in this year's checkouts. Okay, a book of that, I was like, huh? I'm like, I feel like I kind of keep up with the literary world. And then I'm like, do I even keep up with the literary world? Who knows? So this one is The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Okay, by Mel Robbins. Oh my gosh, I'm so like awkward saying it. This is a personal growth. That's what they call it. Personal growth book. I think formerly called self-help. I don't know. The thing is that, okay, so my literary landscape is a lot of BookTube. I watch a lot of BookTube. I read the New York Times in terms, like, I keep up with their book section. I like to scour the lists. I like to keep up with particularly historical fiction. So I see this nonfiction personal growth book and I'm like, huh? What? People read that? But it's only because the people I follow don't, like, they're not out there reading this kind of stuff. BookTube doesn't talk about this kind of stuff. Or this particular genre of reading. So it seems very foreign to me. So when I saw it, I was like, what? Okay, so the next is All Fours by Miranda July. This, I mean, it's like everybody was talking about it. Everybody has talked about it. Like, yeah, National Book Award finalist. It was like New York Times best book of something or other, the women's, I mean, it has just been literally everywhere. This book has been inescapable, okay? And it's been inescapable in that from the earliest part of the year, people have started to talk about it, and it has just continued to have momentum throughout. This is, I have not read it. I've not read Miranda July. It doesn't sound like a book for me, but it could be. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I am open to change. So All Fours is about a woman who decides that she's gonna bind herself, and she's in like perimenopause, and she doesn't make it very far when she starts to have a ravishing love affair with a younger man. I'm like, okay. Yeah, and I laugh because I'm uncomfortable. Okay, no, I laugh because I think I don't know. I don't know about this book, and I don't really get it. I don't know why it's number 3 for the New York Times most checked out books. I don't even know if anyone that I interact with has put this on like their best books of the year list. Maybe I need to pay attention a little bit more. We're back to another big book. So it's The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This I read last summer when it like had just come out and everybody was like, Liz Moore's so great, I love her so much. And it's good. It's told multi-perspective. You're like, this young girl goes missing, and she is the daughter of the people who own this like summer camp, and everybody's looking for her, including the people who work at the summer camp. And we're like, what's happened? Meanwhile, a tragedy has already befell this family years earlier. So how are these connected? And it's funny because I found the book rather mesmerizing when I was reading it. I was like really into it. Like, she did a really good job keeping me engaged, but I didn't think about it very often afterwards. It's also like a chunky mystery, and she doesn't, I don't know how to say it. Like, there's nothing too gritty in it. It's mysterious. It is engaging. It is intriguing. It's right there. Like, it really sucks you in. But if you're someone who's like quite sensitive to graphic materials, this doesn't have anything in it. So it's like an easy recommend for a lot of people. It is an easy one to be pleased by, to be picked up on. Yeah, because there's often like a dark twist, right? In thrillers and mysteries. And sometimes that dark twist can really be like give you the ick. But The God of the Woods, it has a good twist, but it doesn't go to like the icky darkness that would put someone off to the book. So I think it's been a crowd pleaser, and that's why I think that it continues to be recommended. It continues to be checked out. It's just like an easy book to recommend. And then the number 1 book is kind of not surprising, considering New York is a very populated area in the United States, and like it serves different types of communities. And like, anyways, the number 1 book is just not a shocker at all, and it's James by Percival Everett, partly because James won the Pulitzer. And I think that everybody is like, I think it's just easy. It's an easy sell to be like, oh yeah, James, you should read James. And the Pulitzer being like a very American prize, a very like, they're trying to choose books that reflect American life in some way. I think that this, James being on the list is indicative to the curiosity of the American people about literature, the curiosity the American people have about literature on their own country. And also the fact that it was popular before, like it was already being well received. I mean, this is not like, James is not a book where you didn't hear anyone talking about it and then suddenly it won the Pulitzer. No, it's being talked about. It's being recommended. It was already in the conversation in the literary world. People already were recommending it. And then it wins the Pulitzer, and then everybody is like, wow, that book that I had heard of now just won this major American award. Let's go check this out. And I really think that tells the story. Whether it's true or not, I don't know for any of these. But I really think that tells the story of why this is number one. And it's great because I don't think James is a perfect novel. But I think it's a fascinating read. And for it to be number one, I'm like, yeah, I have read it. I liked it. So yeah. Anyhow, if, I would love to know, does your local library put out a list like this? I should look. I was just at my local library very recently, and they didn't, I don't think they had it like a most checked out list, but I wonder if they would, or if they could. Maybe I'll suggest it to them and they'll do it next year. I'll tell you, most checked out for my library has been Dogman and the, oh my gosh, the I Survive series. And graphic novels in general, because that's what kids are really into. Okay, well, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. And I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.